Okay, great.
Okay, so displacement can be your friend. That's something which is brand new in this Group 1 ARV protocol approach. And I want to sort of start with a big picture here to put this all in context. And the number one idea is that basically consciousness itself is the fundamental, this here and now moment that each of us experiences in our own way is the fundamental. And that includes thinking. When you have a thought, that's a conscious moment, and also the more, the fun emotions and feelings, spiritual feelings, ideas, all of those are in your consciousness realm. The one task as a remote viewer, which you have while you're doing this 1ARV work, is to entangle your feedback session with your remote viewing session. Gather information from your feedback session when you have the target in front of you, when you know the truth. When you're doing your remote viewing session over here in linear time, it's as if, there are many models of time and precognition, gathering information from the future, and this is just one, but you're like jumping forward, getting this information from the future simply by intending it. This is the way the universe works. You can do this. You all know that. And then you come back and share that information, and that influences your remote viewing session, so you put down target information. That's one way of looking how you get it. And then you don't have to worry about what comes in between, the judging, and you might do wagering. The event outcome in associative remote viewing, of course, chooses the target, but you don't care. You jump immediately to the target. It's all psychological. That's a basic quote from Joe McMonagle. He was once asked in an interview how much of it is psychological, and he basically said it's all psychological. And of course it really is. We all have sub-personalities within us. We've just grown up, and it's like we have various quantum subroutines going all the time within us. And those balance to give us our total personality. And one of our jobs is to bring those into harmony to carry out our intentions as remote viewers as best as possible. And in this process, I think, you're all remote viewers. You've had classes, you've done some of this. I think you see this. Watching your own self as you do this is always so important. And then the last one is many of you are wagering money, but you're also wagering your time. And I think it's really important to do that in a wise fashion. Some of the remote viewings are, you can use it for missing persons. Is this missing person Joe Smith in Chicago? Yes or no? That's an ARV type question. Depending on how the results look, how much energy do you put into it? How much energy do you suggest other people put into it? That's a kind of wagering too, because you're wagering your time, your energy. And you know what? I'm sharing as much as I know. Other people, other teachers, instructors are sharing as much as they know. Ultimately, you need to trust yourself about all of this. You come and need to learn to become your own teacher and learn how to trust yourself. Okay, I want to summarize now and begin to get into displacement. And I want to begin by reminding you how the binary ARV, the old standard approach, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but your father's ARV. I really believe what we're doing is much better and newer. But the way the binary approach works, it starts just the way ours would. You're given a coordinate, you're going to generate a transcript, the way you get the information from the transcript is you go forward in time and you pick it up from the target. But in binary ARV, there's one transcript. The judge, the analyst judge, now has two sides and one photo site associated with each side. One side might be up. If we're talking financials, the other side might be down. This could be over a certain number of points if you're doing sports, but there are always two sides. We call those sides. And based on matching, you get one prediction. You always, as a target, see what actually happens, and that's the end of it. So if side one occurs, you'll see a sailboat here, and your job is to describe that sailboat. However, what happens way too often, and which is the reason that binary ARV has never really been able to make this jump over about the 60 to 65% range for the long term. We've all had our streaks, but for the long term, it always seems to come down. There's something in the psychology or whatever that limits it, and it has to do with the judging, because it's the judge and the judging process that in this consciousness space, in this matrix, in this universe of collective consciousness, that both of these targets are known and are very strongly entangled, connected, because they're looked at with the same transcript. This forms a very strong triangle right here. Now let's look at what happens with one ARV. In one ARV, notice it's the same. You're doing one coordinate, one transcript. You're going to get one prediction out of this, and you are going to get a feedback. However, notice there is only one indicator photo site. We call that an indicator photo site because it's judged, your transcript is judged against this. If, in fact, it's good, just as in binary, then that would be the prediction. But there's no second one to displace to for this coordinate and this transcript. So this is basically one unitary ARV prediction. We now have a second side. I used to break things up into two groups, but I found people really would prefer to do two because you want to have an association. The remote viewers wanted to have an association with the side that actually occurred. And this has some other good side benefits. So what we're now doing in one ARV is you have one coordinate, one transcript, one IPS, and then you have a second coordinate entirely independent. It's got nothing to do with this. It happens to be associated with the other side. You have two IPSs now. As a judge, we look at this side, look at this transcript, leads to we evaluate using this TAR confidence scale, but we get a confidence ranking. Do we think this is a match? Or we look at this coordinate, we get a confidence level, and do we think this is the match? In the best of all possible worlds, one would be a very, very good match, and the other wouldn't, and we would make a prediction. Now, it still turns out, and we have to acknowledge this, that this is now a displacement zone, but it's no longer the same. It's no longer also a danger displacement zone, because what we have found is when we get good matches, say, with the sailboat, and that turns out to be what people are going to get back as their target, okay? So everybody who is doing coordinate one, and let's say this is the side that actually happens, will in fact get this back. We find that when they do this separate coordinate, they will give descriptions of things like a water, um, something having to do with motion, might say something about sails or tall or an island behind. Down here, they will describe this picture. Well, you want to know something? That indeed is displacement. We don't encourage it because as a remote viewer, you'd like to always go to your target, but we live in a world where the subconscious mind seems to have a mind of its own. I mean, it's something that we have simply learned. We learned that in the binary. In the binary, when it does that, it will cause us, when it does it the other way, to give the wrong answer and get a miss. Here, it can help us. In the binary, there was no way it could help us. But this idea that the sub has a mind of its own and might, in fact, want to help out here is something which happens only in this 1ARV approach. Okay? So this is kind of a key, and let me just summarize here now. The indicator photo sites on the side that actually happens will be what we call the group target. Everybody in the group, since they all share that one coordinate, will get back that photo site. And so there's a kind of coherence associated with that, and I'm going to show you some examples of that, including displacement can be your friend there. Now, on the other side, each of the viewers, this is the wildcard side, the side that did not happen, they will get their own wildcard. Most people are choosing that wildcard from a one-click approach we have where you can get this from a set of over 7,500 photo sites. And there's no coherence because each of them get their own feedback target. Now, this is a perfectly good, just like any other remote viewing session, and you get your feedback, and you get to evaluate yourself and learn something from how you did. Okay. I really see the mindset being one of this is a personal journey, even though we're into this as a group, because you're each doing your own remote viewing session. And yet, it's from the fact that we're kind of working together that we get this coherence and this idea of displacement being your friend comes in. First, let me show you one where there was no displacement. I'll show you a couple of them. You know, I've got lots of them now, and I have a whole series of these in a PowerPoint presentation. I'm happy to give any of you a link so you can see that. But this is just a kind of example of what we get from the group, which helps make my judging and Chris's judging hopefully easy, because when you get multiple ones, and these are from 3 different people, you can see the different colors surrounding them. You know, you get the idea of the slides, you get the idea of the circle here, rim, circles, feeling abrupt, sudden. You feel very comfortable making a prediction in this direction, the side associated with this indicator photo site, and this indeed became the target. Here's another one from different people. Okay, you can see they captured the woman and got the arch here, structure, something coming closer, people in the environment, got the perspective here. You know, any one of these not clear would have been strong enough, but together, and this is like a group transcript. Each person's doing their own thing, focused on their own feedback. We'll do a feedback session, which is critical. That's where it all begins individually, and yet we're getting good hit rates because we get a group transcript. Okay, and this is this is one like this, which again I think was very interesting. Not all of you may have seen these before if you were in different groups, but I love this hand thing. I love the dancing motion. This was a pretty easy one, very easy one to judge. Okay, and here's another one. I guess I gave a lot of these. Okay, now let's take a look at some of the displacement ones. This was the very first displacement example that occurred. And in fact, you're here, Teresa. Was this you? I meant to look.
That was Essie.
Oh, that was Essie. Okay. And this happens with different people in unpredictable ways, and it is as it should be. In other words, this doesn't happen all the time. We don't count on it happening. But when it does happen, something like this. Here was a target, the indicator photo site for coordinate 983, 984. And there were some, reasonable matches, not super strong against that. Now I go look at the other coordinate for the other side, right? 891346. And I'm sitting here as a judge looking at this, knowing that this is the other indicator photo site. What am I supposed to do? What conclusion do I come to? Well, frankly, I felt and still feel that the proper conclusion for me to come to as a judge is I trust my viewers. I know my viewers are going to see this if this is the side that actually occurs. And how would they get such a good example? You can say, well, yeah, all the information is out there and they can peek and it won't happen for who knows what reason. But it's much more likely that they got it from their own feedback. I mean, we emphasize feedback so much. This is the feedback. They remote influence themselves during their remote viewing session, which is another way of looking at what's happening here, and got what is on the 0 to 7 scale, at least a 6, 6.5, maybe even a 7. I don't know. It's hard to get much better than this. This is excellent. This is an example of how displacement can be your friend. So, different coordinate, good information. This now is the way I'm now showing it. I call this bleed through because it's coming from the other side. So here's an example. Here is the side that actually occurred. This was the group feedback photo site. Here were the people with this coordinate that they got people, noise, loud, clamoring, I feel excited, people moving. Okay, so that was the information for that coordinate. On the other side, audience, okay, so notice it's kind of in a shadow box, bleed-throughs and shadow boxes. That's the style I've set up for whatever reason. Happy people, large crowd, stage, performance, drum major, ping, musical instruments. This one was sort of marginal, but I kind of liked this. Even though the strings weren't right, I sort of saw here, and the same person got brown, woody, grainy, squeaky. So overall, the bleed-through was at least as strong, maybe even stronger than the regular coordinate. So again, what do you do as a judge? Put this out as the prediction, and indeed it was a hit. So I think you understand the idea of bleed through. Here's another one where there were pretty good sessions on the side, in this case, direction, movement, downward, flapping, vehicle. This looked like fenders to me. Scary, movement, hard, moving, dense, silver, moving, open. This is the bleed through. Another viewer got this and as a sign of death. It is all as a sign of death and disaster. Okay, movement, pretty good bleed through, right? Gave me more confidence on this prediction. Here's another example. So while, as I say, bleed through doesn't happen all the time, I in fact discourage it. I think bleed through really comes from the subconscious, if you like, intend it. Like I've had some people only give me one session, figuring, well, all I'm going to do is get the right one. They actually hurt themselves. Some people have tried, okay, I'm going to go for the actual group one and both ones. No, don't do that. Do each one individually, and if your sub decides it wants to do a bleed through, let it. In the binary approach, it used to do it. You didn't know why. You couldn't figure it out. It did it. Now it's got an opportunity to do it in a way which is helpful. Okay, so again, you can see the kind of examples here, and this was the bleed through one, where you can see kind of the eruption was in this bleed through, and here crashing, chattering, harsh, loud, reverberating. And other examples. As part of the standard protocol now, the judges always put together in one form or another. Chris does it somewhat differently than I do, and that's fine. He's in charge of his group. But we always put together the summary, because as a judge, it actually helps us. The judges are learning along with the remote viewers, because it forces you, knowing you're going to do this, to, when you're doing your judging, okay, why actually do I think this is the right one? And I always go through a phase now where I look for bleed-throughs. Often I don't find them. Sometimes I do. So in this case, you can see the fog haze smoke, regular, sparkling, round. This one saw flowers. I think this was you, Teresa. And yet I saw the water here in the bowl, and I think this was the fish. That was my interpretation. But, if that's all I had, I wouldn't go with this one by any means. But with everything else, and then with the bleed-throughs here of what, these are sharks. Talks about sharks here. I can see a shark feeling here. This looks like a bat, but look at the nature of the fins and everything. Very much this geometry. Flying and spinning with the overhead. I love that. And the idea of motion going over. All of this was, I thought, was quite good. Quite good. Okay. And then I think this is our most recent one, the 18th. Yeah, this was a couple of days ago. Here's the picture, and the pale orange, dark brown, hard, rough, unsafe, I thought was interesting. Crosshatch, which is here, yellow, black, blue, white. And then here they got laboratory. And if you look here, you can see this is a guy, I'm not sure he's in a shooting range. He actually looks like he's, I don't know where, but laboratory is pretty close, and it's certainly telescope. Tubular, moving parts, police, military, man in uniform. Here, this was good. Subjects blend into background, camouflaging. And then this, to me, looked like the scope. And it turned out in this one of the people had another sketch, and I think they were right. There were indications of a head on arrest. I didn't see it, and I didn't put it in here, just because as a judge, I didn't use that as part of my judging process. Whether I should put it in or not, I don't know. But I didn't put it in. Okay, so that's the idea of displacement can be your friend. Now let's look at the stats. This were the situation at the IRVA conference June 7th, okay, so a month and a half ago or so. And this was really, to me, the cumulative 66%, which wasn't any really better than the ARV. Binary ARV did, what was encouraging, okay, in fact, I'm going to do this in a different order now. I'll go back and show you that other stuff. What was encouraging then was that if you look at 25, you ignore passes, so it's like a 25-day moving average, because over the long term, you don't want to just look at the cumulative. It changes pretty slowly, so let's look over something that's roughly a period of a month and a half. 25-day moving average. You got this, which leveled off at like 64%, again like ARV, binary ARV. However, it never went below 50%. In the CRV presentation, I showed the equivalent of this, and it would go way down as low as 30% over the long term, because the displacement would come in cycles which were just terrible. And we're not seeing signs of that. Now, let me show you where we are. From June 7th to today, July 20th, the increase from 51 hits to 26 is 62 hits, 29 misses, which is a 68%. So this curve, and I just haven't had time to update the graphics yet, but this curve is now up to 68%. The odds against chance are 2,800 to 1. Those of you who know a little bit about stats, that's a Z of over 3. And I want you to know I'm well past paying attention to the stats at all. By every scientific method, all the work I've done and the work that others have done under stronger scientific protocols and all the rest, there's no question that not only, we all know this is real because we've seen it ourselves firsthand, but it's been proven in the scientific way. But science and society doesn't want to accept it for their own reasons, and I don't give a darn at this point. We're going ahead and applying it. So the key thing is the 68%, but even better than that, if you look since the conference, and since I've announced that our goal is to reach 80% on a 25-day moving average for the long term, just okay, so over the long term, we now have a hit rate of 79%. So if this would be for 25 total rather than just 14, we'd be up at 79% on our long-term chart. And again, I haven't worked out the 25 moving day, but it's certainly up here someplace, and I will do that, and I'll report that at one of our Friday meetings. But this curve, indeed, since then has done nothing but move up, and my guess is it's up here someplace. Okay, so that's what I have to say. You guys have any questions, comments?
I got one here for you, Marty. In regards to your 80% goal, which obviously is super, and you announced at the IRVA conference, I believe. What factor other than back to the personal psychology is throwing that number out there? Is that just a something you're throwing out there, saying, okay, sub, let's get this 80%, and if so, why not 100%?
Perfect. And I do see your question, Teresa, and it's the answer is related to both of those. I thought a long time about whether or not I wanted to publicly, and in a very public fashion, put out the 80% level as a long-term goal. And after kind of thinking about it, meditating about it, getting into my own feelings about it, it became very clear to me that I did, and for the following reason. One, I wanted to get other people to recognize what I recognize, and that is that this is an achievable goal. First, inside yourself, you have to come to the place where you believe this is a achievable goal, and I believe 80% is achievable, and it's quite a significant achievable goal. It's the kind of achievable goal that is going to, I think, be one of the steps which might in fact get society to pay more attention to us, because at 80% over the long term, this becomes a very viable technique for whatever application you want. You know, you can incorporate 20% misses. So 80% was an achievable. I feel it in my gut, and I wanted other people to start feeling it in their gut. And by putting it out there and putting it out in as positive way as I can, I hope I've set us up for what's just happened since the conference. And that's the answer to your question, Teresa. I put it out there with confidence. I think people have taken it on with confidence. Yeah, I can do that. We can do that. So let's do it. And I don't see 80% as being the ultimate. I see that as being the next goal. When I have a curve just like this one, which then moves up into this range, maybe we'll set the goal to be 90%, 95%. But right now the goal is 80%. Whether it's possible to do 100%, I must admit there's a part of me that says over the long term. So that would be, can this thing stick here? I believe it's possible. Okay, I'm not going to say it's impossible. Could it stick there for a year? But I think it's unlikely, just because we're real people and there are lots of steps, and I think a miss every now and then will happen. Will 90%, 95% be where we'll be a year, 2 years, 3 years from now? Yes. I'm going to stay positive with that because I see no reason why we cannot do it.
Marty, I had a question in reference to what you're talking about in attaining this goal. How have you, over the years, modified the criteria in judging? I mean, what kind of a variance or a spread between the scores are you looking for, or have you raised the mark, lowered it in terms of judging? Because obviously, a stricter guideline is going to increase the hit rate.
Okay, that is the cutting edge question for us as judges. And let me tell you everything I know about that, Chris, that I can right now, okay? Because that is, right now you and I are the only two Group 1 ARV judges. So we are facing up to this together, and we need to keep talking about it and learning together. What I have learned over the years is this idea you're coming out about becoming stricter is not the way to go, in my opinion, right now. I worked for a very long time, and I looked at the statistics for a very long time at my confidence rankings to try to come up with, gee, when the confidence rankings are 5 or 6 or 7, that's the only time I should go. But in those days, remember, there was displacement around. And so that didn't work. I looked at what I should do about the differences in a quantitative way, and all I could find was kind of muddled. It was just never clear. And worse than it not being clear, it seemed to change. Whenever I came up with a model which I thought would work, it didn't work when it was purely analytical. Get that, purely analytical, because I could tell by your question that's what you're looking for. And I know why I was looking for that, because it would make my job so much easier. if I could come up with that, because it is true that as judges we try to set everything up so we focus on our judging, we get the confidence rankings, and then we'd like to make a group prediction. My current position is, first of all, bleed through helps. However, it's not the total answer in the sense of being able to analytically come up with a way, because I don't know yet how much credit do I give for bleed through. You know, I do look at it as a group transcript mentally. I don't put together what you saw as those AJ summaries in advance. But when I'm judging, I have on my Excel spreadsheet all the information of what matched in the direct way and then in a bleed-through way. And so I'm looking at it then. And then what I find is I give it a group judging. And by that point in time, you just have to say the way you put it all together has an element of intuition. And I think that's appropriate. In other words, you and I, because of our experiences, our experience level, have an intuition based on both past experience, and I also believe you get information from the future. I believe your higher self, if you want to use that terminology, your future self, is part of the intuition you have, and you bring that to bear, and you give a confidence ranking for one side, you give a confidence ranking for the other side, and then I won't even consider doing a non-pass unless they're one apart. And that has just come from experience, So I want the two confidence ranking after this process of bringing in an intuitive element to be 1 point apart. But I have to tell you, this gets entangled. I'm being totally honest with you, because this very last step has an element of I can change it by a half based on my intuition to make it 1 point apart or not. You see what I'm saying? The
Yes.
final step, that final step when you jump, is really an intuitive one, unless it's clear. You have to understand, there's always this gray area. Sometimes it's easy. You've had some of them where they're easy. You know, one group side is a 4, the other's a 2. One group side's a 5, the other's a 2 or a 3. When they're 2 apart, I find it's really easy. But it's when they're down to the 1.5 apart as a group level, it's the personal judge's intuition that makes that choice. That's where I'm coming from now as a judge.
Okay, I agree with you.
It's not easy. And you're going to keep learning, Chris. It's one of the funs. A lot of people find it hard. This is a challenge. And yet it's beautiful. And it's causing me to kind of expand my own consciousness, and I think you'll find the same thing.
Yes, I agree.
Okay. Other comments, questions? Anybody want to share anything that they found that would be helpful to, others who are here?
Hey, Marty, Brian.
Mm-hmm. Hi, Brian.
I guess I'm kind of making a correlation. If, one ARV starts with the feedback session,
Yep.
then the bleed through starts with the analysis judge.
Well, no, I would say the bleed through, let's look at this example here. Okay, the person is doing their coordinate. I don't remember what it was, but it was the other coordinate for this one. Okay, you understand that?
Yes.
When they generated this transcript, so there, it's the remote viewer now. They're in their mindset, and that remote viewer, that person's subconsciousness, has access to everything. They're going to do a feedback session on that coordinate. But when they do that feedback session on that coordinate, they would have already looked here. So I think their subconscious, for whatever reason, having a mind of its own, decided to put some of that information in there. Now the judging time may very well have something to do with it as well, because that is another time this photo got put out in this universe of collective consciousness, in the matrix, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So yes, I think both of those are potentially out there. However, I do believe that it's more from the viewer's feedback time. Because I think that's much stronger. I think it's much easier for a viewer to get in touch with their own information. And of course, that's what I want viewers to train themselves to do. You should train yourself to get in touch with your own feedback for that coordinate. And if your viewer wants to peek at another feedback, you don't want to train it to do that, but it has a mind of its own, and it will do that sometime. In fact, I've seen viewers, in fact, this was Teresa, give a good description of a feedback she was going to see in the future from one of her other groups. So that was kind of an interesting one. I mean, the subconscious, and I think every time you see that, you say, hey, subconscious, that's kind of cool, but, don't do that, if you can help it. There are so many examples out there in the bigger remote viewing world where the remote viewers, the military remote viewers, did that, and it was very helpful. The whole remote viewing program started by a displacement from a cabin, which was the target, to a secret facility that was a few miles away. And they described that secret facility so well that they got follow-up contracts. How could they do that? They thought there was a security leak. Now, that was a displacement. But the subconscious, for whatever, now you can look at it and say, gee, the subconscious wanted remote viewing to go on, wanted to help the long-range program, and described the secret site, which generated an awful lot of information about that secret site. Now, which came first? All the interest in the secret site associated with the remote viewers? You see, this stuff is the past and present are all entangled.
Yeah. So the bleed-through is mainly a cumulative of the viewer and the AJ, but you're saying that most of that is attributed to the viewer.
The viewer and the viewer's feedback. And the viewer's feedback. Think of it that way. That is the strongest entanglement. Remember, each of us, and this is strange, but it is true. I mean, and science won't even disagree. Everything is connected to everything else. You have to accept that. So many strange things that happen because there are those entanglements. The issue is the strength of the entanglement. And the strength of the entanglement is much stronger between the remote viewing sessions and the feedback sessions because the remote viewer puts that energy there. That's why the remote viewing, when ARVing, begins with the feedback session. That's the source of that question. That's where you know the truth. You add the energy. You make it important. I try to make the targets as interesting, as engaging as possible. But if you get a target that's boring, you should make it interesting in some fashion, just to light it up.
both on the viewer and the judge's side, I guess, you know, more of a willful intent to control the entropy levels of the photo sites when you're viewing them. Of, you know, okay, here is the photo site, let's have the high energy level, and here's the wall card, let's have a low entropy.
Well, no, but close. Let me modify that, because I think you're onto something. I know when I'm a judge, I try not to add entropy. I mean, I know what you're saying. I try not to add excitement to it at all. Okay. Even when I see it going strongly for one side, I try to be as intellectual as possible, knowing I can't do that completely. Also, I'm open to getting this information, this intuitive edge as I get near the end. But I don't want to add entropy because I want the judging thing to be low content. I don't want remote viewers when they're doing remote viewing and when they're doing their feedback to think about that at all. Like this conversation we're having now, unless you're thinking of becoming a judge, and I'm encouraging everybody to think about that because that's the way we're going to get more and more people involved, you don't think about the judging. You entangle with your own feedback session. Feedback entangles with your remote viewing session, period. But so I try to keep, as a judge, reduce the entropy level, look at this in a way of, okay, how am I going to be putting together this AJ summary? What really matches? And I print out every one of the transcripts and I circle the good stuff which I know is going to go on here, and I write it on my spreadsheet. Now, in choosing targets, I don't choose them to be opposite entropy. I always choose them to be engaging, to have high entropy. Okay. So the one that was not this one, if I were to show you that one, it would also be, in my opinion, different. I want it to be different, and that just makes it easier for me as a judge. Also for bleed through, I want them to be different when that happens. But I also want it to be, from the viewer's perspective, interesting and have high entropy. So when they do their feedback session, they can kind of more easily get into the feedback photo site.
Okay.
Marty, to kind of follow up on what I think Brian was maybe getting at, first a comment and then a question. You know, because I can potentially see as the judge, yes, you're viewing them independently, and now there's a little bit of aspect of cross-comparing them, looking for this bleed-through. So I think there is a little bit of entanglement there, maybe not so much as in a traditional ARV model, but, you know, I can see a little bit of that. Second question was, back in the early days when ARV was just getting off the road, we had two separate groups. One side had one side of the outcome, the other side had the other, and there were two separate judges. Mm-hmm. And you know, obviously the goal with one ARV was to reduce this bleed through, reduce the displacement. And what did you find? Did the bleed through come about more after this was happening, after you made the change, or did it make any difference with separate judges only seeing just their photos and just their transcripts? And having said that, I do remember in one occasion we had extremely high target scores on one side. You know, they were all 4s, 5s, you know, 6 in there, and that one was a miss. But you know, obviously you're seeing something to make these changes along the way too.
Okay, let me see if I can put this in context here a little bit. That time when we did independent judging with TARG was still binary. Okay, are you remembering that way as well? That was when
This is when one IRV first got set up. In fact, I think I was in Don Walker's group, and he had one side of the outcome. And I think you or Catherine or somebody had the other side. They were still separate coordinates, but each viewer would only view one coordinate for one side.
Okay. Okay, very good. Okay, thank you. It just wasn't TARG, that's all, because TARG was not involved at that level yet. I don't think. Anyway, I understand your point, and let me tell you, and the others, how this displacement issue came around. When we were doing it separately, and notice at one of the earlier, and it may have even been last year's IRVA conference, we did that. I had like 100 people on one side with one set of judges and 100 people on the other side with one set of judges, separate judges, and they did independent judging, and one side did do very positively, the other side got very low scores, and that was a hit, made a lot of people very happy, including me. But notice when you do that, whether it's in a big group or a small group like we did with Don, you can't have displacement because the judges don't have access to the other, well, you can't have beneficial displacement, let me put it that way, because they don't have access to the other photo. And the thinking there was, okay, you're only looking at one photo, so you can't get the negative kind of displacement. It was with the separate judging and doing it separately that we were forced to face up to the reality, which said you can get 5, 6s, even a 7. The remote viewers are good enough to do that even though they never see the picture. In other words, the example that you said was kind of a learning experience, and maybe it was the sub trying to say that. Hey guys, even though the remote viewers aren't going to see it, I can go to the judge's consciousness and I can get the picture there. Yeah, you told me I'm not supposed to do it. Sorry, I want to do it. I want to show you I can do it. Turns out that's really very important because that's one of the things that I've learned. I stopped at about that same time, or maybe even at the end of when I was doing binary, of encouraging viewers, even though I didn't mean to, by letting them know they displaced. You let a viewer know they displaced, and they got a miss. Well, guess what? I'm psychic. Look, I displaced. They would get happy. And even when we use separate judges, the subconscious, with a mind of its own, would read the mind of the judges, because I was involved in some of that. And every now and then we still see it. However, since we've had one judge see both sides, I haven't had the negative displacement, the one where they're reading from the judge's mind because they never see it, happen nearly as much as the friendly displacement, the bleed-through displacement. That's a very significant result, and I do think it tells us something about the subconscious. I mean, I think the subconscious does actually want to be helpful, but it wants to have a little bit more freedom than our ego would like to give it. And I think one ARV provides an environment for that.
Sounds fair enough.
That's what I believe now, and we're going to keep moving forward, and I'm continuing to learn with the rest of you. Let me tell you, it's great. In fact, if I ever reach the point where I stop learning, I'll stop. So, okay. Any more? I'm glad to have more comments, more questions. Okay, good. And it's
Marty,
yep.
I'll go ahead and throw one more out there and just another thought. And this has less to do with the ARV process or the one ARV process, but just what the goal is the ultimate goal of setting up all these separate groups, and I'm privy to just one of the group's correspondence, and I don't know how it works, but are the different groups doing different predictions on different games, or are they all doing the same thing? And do you ever see a point in which collaboratively the different groups would work together and say, hey, well, this is what we came up with for game A, and the other group says, well, this is what we got for B, with the idea, and there you have to trust that the different groups are gonna do as well as your group hopefully would. But it certainly would increase the number of predictions on a weekly basis. If you had 5 groups, you can come up with 5 predictions per week. And and I'll be quite honest, and I've said it before, I'm more of a gambler or a punter that does ARV than an ARVer that does fiddles on this side of it. And for the perspective of even 65%, you look at a long-term sports handicapper, and they would be thrilled to death if they could get 65% long-term.
Right.
But anyway, you're looking at 80. Say you get up to 80%, and you're looking at it's the turnover of the number of games that's going to get you your true edge, and your true reward for doing the work.
Okay.
If that all makes sense.
It does. I've thought about all that. And I'm taking this approach, which doesn't quite emphasize things as much as you would like, coming from your position, for the following reason. One of my highest level goals is to get as many people involved in this as possible. So I am not looking at it from a small set of people being able to make a lot of good wagers. I want this to spread out. And so I only want each of these groups to basically be independent. And I'll modify that in a moment, because I also do have thoughts about how to get them all to work together occasionally. But right now, it's a group of people. They do independent sports events or financial events. 3 of these groups, 1, 2, 3, are doing sports. 2, this one and this one, are doing financial. Independently, period. The only one, and this is an advantage, and it's a conscious advantage of trying to get people, and you may be a candidate for this, Gary, to be a judge, is I actually get access to multiple groups because I'm judging multiple groups. There are several remote viewers that are in 2 groups. There might even be one that's in 3 groups as a remote viewer. They then get access to 2 or 3 predictions a week. So that's how you can get access to more predictions. However, you have to feel comfortable that you're still providing your best effort transcripts.
Right.
But that's one way to do it. So you might consider becoming a judge or joining other groups. So, you could try to start your own group. Go talk it up with some other people who you know. And then you can remain in this group and start another group. So then you can bring in your own sporting events, whatever own angle you want. Okay, so that's the answer to that. Plus, if you notice, the other answer is when you get a hit rate of 80%, you can wait until the prediction comes out. One of the keys to this is knowing when to pass. That's that right on the edge there often. But as time goes on, we're going to continue wagering wisely. But as time goes on, the wager level will go up, and it's not clear you'll need as many wagers to continue making money at a level that you feel comfortable with. But got to continue wagering wisely. I'm convinced if you start wagering and you know in your gut, and you'll know this, you have to trust yourself, if you're wagering too much on any one, you're going to start getting misses. I know that. Everybody's got to keep wagering wisely here. We're going for the long term. Now, in terms of the groups doing things together, I'm really at the point where I may say, and I'll probably introduce it at one of these meetings, hey guys, why don't we go maybe even back for a horse race or something like that, where we try to pick the winner. And notice we're still going to use our same approach, which means each group will get a different horse because it's still binary. It's either this horse, horse 1 will win the given horse race, or horse number 2, position number 2, or horse number 3, 4, 5, 6. They have harness races where there really are only sometimes as little as 6 or 7 horses running, and you can wager on those sorts of things. Knowing then that one horse is going to win, all the other people are going to get wild cards. Nothing wrong with that. Wild cards, and I hope people are getting more and more comfortable with getting wild cards. But that would be a way where you could have odds which would be different than 50-50, depending on which horse wins. Or you could do one, and I actually once did this with regular ARVing. Let's say you're down to a World Series where you have only 4 teams left. You could then say, okay, which team is going to win the World Series? Team 1, Team 2, Team 3, Team 4. And now you have 4 of the groups active doing something like that. So there are things you can do still with the same binary approach involving multiple groups. And then, of course, everybody would share with the answers. And each of the groups would do their own judging, and somebody would make a prediction. The only problem with that is you can see some of the groups getting a pass. It just gets more difficult. And I've spent some time doing stuff like this with the lottery and other things, and I've come to the conclusion that at least for the long term, it's better to keep focusing on something which is close to 50-50 and get a long-term hit rate of like 80% for now or higher, and that's pretty comfortable. So I hope I answered your question.
Sure.
The different groups have different days. I actually can probably get that for you. To manage all this, I have a calendar like this. So a lot of you know I had a mini vacation. It was a Mammoth Jazz Festival. So the AJing, the 1AR group, is on Monday. The Pegasus is Tuesday. The October is AJing Wednesday. I put that trade in on Thursday. Here's a wager on Thursday. And where were there 2? I know there were 2. When did you say there were 2? What day is transfer? I know 2 are on Monday. Oh yeah, here are the 2. So Monday I have to AJ 2. That's the only day I AJ 2. So I've set these out for my convenience, for my ability to do it.
What's this, Mark? Giving yourself Sundays off, huh? You need 1 day away.
Well, that's right. And on these days, I just do reminders and give people coordinates for the next week. So those are easy days. But that was one of the reasons. It was clear I tapped out. That's why Chris was just, the timing was perfect for him to come along and start another group, and I'm doing everything I know how to get other people to start other groups as well.
How many people would you say you have altogether through your ARV groups right now that are consistently participating, Marty? Do you have a ballpark idea?
Ballpark, I would say 25-ish.
Okay.
You know, because I have five active groups, and typically I get 5 transcripts, sometimes less, sometimes more.
Gotcha.
Okay, I'd like to call it a day. I want to do these regularly, but keep it down to an hour for planning purposes, you know, that I can go about the rest of my day. So thank you all for coming, and keep one ARV.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marty.
Thank you.
Good.
Thanks, Marty.
Great. Take care, and always feel free to email me if you have any other questions.